I'm back again, and with the work with me of the outfit I made for my Instagram giveaway from last year. So I first start with the underwear or the inner layer or whatever you want to call it. It has 5 pieces, 2 front pieces, back piece and 2 sleeves. My first step is to pin and sew the shoulder seams together, and then I flip the seam allowance one side and sew that in place. And then I pin and sew the shoulders of the sleeves and the torso together. For this outfit, we're going to need lots and lots of ribbon though. So just prepare it beforehand. I'm using a chiffon for this inner layer and just normal satin ribbon. So for this technique, or what I'm going to do now, I'm going to do throughout the whole project. So I first pin and sew down one side of the ribbon, making sure the ribbon only catches part of my fabric. So the less fabric I have under my ribbon, the better. Because I'm going to fold it over after I've sewn one side, and if there's too much fabric in the space where I want to fold over the ribbon, it's going to be a bit bulky. Not that it can't be a bit bulky, it's just since I have chiffon fabric, it's a bit more noticeable. So here I'm pinning the ribbons to the sleeves on one side, then sewing them, then folding it over and pinning and sewing again. After I've done the sleeves, I'm going to sew up the sides of the sleeves and the body. So I start pinning at the sleeves, going on along the edge of the sleeve and pinning the body. After sewing, I turn the sleeves inside out, and if needed, I iron the piece I have so far. So next I'm going to repeat my ribbon, pin the ribbon on one side, sew, fold over, sew the other side around the collar piece and the front bottom edge of the piece. And actually after that is going to be the exact same thing with the bottom edge. Like before, I've sewn one side and then I fold over and pin and sew the other side. Usually I cut my ribbon lengths beforehand so I can seal the edges. Anyway, skip. Next I have my skirt, or my middle piece, or well, yeah, pretty much a skirt. In this, usually I use a half circle pattern for the skirt. At this time I went a full circle so I can gather it at the top. And so my first step is to roll up and sew the edges on the back opening. It's basically fold over once, then fold over twice, then pin in place, and then sew. This layer is also made of a chiffon. Anyway, then I sew up those pieces, and I'm going to repeat with the bottom edge of the skirt what I've done before. Pin on one side, sew, fold over, pin, and sew again. And skip. You can see me folding over and pinning the other side. By the time it gets to a full circle skirt, there is so much fabric and pinning you have to do that you run out of pins eventually. I've said this in previous videos, but even though I love circle skirts, finishing off the edges is so much work and so tedious and sometimes annoying. Well, you can't have the best of both worlds, I guess. But circle skirts are so pretty and flowy. Anyway, for the design, I was given as the prize from the winner of the giveaway. They wanted a plain red skirt and no accent colors, but in this step of the skirt you can put the ribbon at the bottoms and the top with a different color or an accent color or what have you to make it more interesting. And almost done. If you're wondering what I'm checking on my phone, it's basically the reference picture. After that, I gather up the top edge and check how the fit is above the bust of my mannequin to make sure I've gathered enough. Now I take quite a bit of wider ribbon and I'm going to sew it to the gathered part. This outfit was actually done at the end of last year when I had less experience with gathering, so it took me a while to figure it out properly. So this piece of fabric, you can use any type of fabric. It could be a decorative piece or an accent color or maybe something with a picture or embroidery or whatever to spice it up a bit. But according to the sketch I have from the giveaway winner, it's just a plain red in this case. And I sew that up and we have our other ribbon piece, well, that I'm going to find the center of and then find the center of my fabric and pin on one side, sew, fold over, pin the other side. But we have some extra pieces of fabric at the sides which we're going to use to tie up the skirt at the back. So tying it up and twirly, twirly, twirly. Okay, next we have the outer layer consisting of 6, 7, 8 pieces, similar to the inner layer, to front torso, to a back torso, 2 sleeves. Then we have 2 sleeve cuffs and 1 piece that goes around the collar front. So as usual, I start pinning at the shoulders, pinning the backs and the fronts together, and folding over, I didn't show it, but folding over the seam allowance and sewing that to one side. And since it's a lot of fabric, it's better to, well, have it a bit stronger at the shoulders. Then I sew on the sleeves at the shoulders again. Unlike the inner layer, I'm not going to be sewing the sleeve cuffs to the sleeves at this point, because the sleeve cuffs are going to be folded over, and if I sew it now, it's going to be, the ugly seam is going to be on the outside. So after sewing the sleeves at the shoulders to the body, I pin up the sides from the sleeves down the sides to the bottom. The black fabric I'm using in this step is a satin. You could also use a silk for a similar kind of finish, but there's no silk available in my fabric store. And the fabric I'm using for the sleeve cuffs and the front collar piece, is a brocade. Okay, sewing that up. And turning the sleeves inside out. And you can take this opportunity to paste the seams and iron the fabric. And then I have a long rectangular strip for the collar piece. I fold it in half and start pinning from the bottom at the front on one side, and going all along the top to the collar where the neck is, then going all the way back to the bottom on the other side. Just to note, very importantly, chiffon satin, brocade. They're all fabrics that have the ability to fray when looking at them. So, well, not literally, but it always feels like it. Just look at that fabric and it frays. But yeah, not literally, but almost. So you have to make sure that the edges of those fabrics are nice and sealed. Whether you use the flame of a candle or fabric glue or fray check, whatever. When you're working with satin, chiffon and especially brocade, you have to seal the edges of the fabric. And if you're hearing any bird sounds or cat sounds, it's morning and all the animals are in a good mood waking up. Okay, so after sewing that, I press the seam, which I didn't show, and I start with the sleeves. And they're also rectangular pieces of fabric, wider than the collar, but we also fold them in half and pin it to our sleeves. But we put our sleeve cuffs on the inside of the sleeve, and remember the sleeve has been turned right side out, and then we're going to sew on the right side, because later we're going to flip over the cuff, and so that and then we're not going to see that seam. So yeah, pinning the sleeve cuff on the inside of the sleeve that has been turned right side out. Anyway, one could say all in all, this outfit is pretty simple, but it takes a long time to make. Yeah, after I've sewed the sleeves, I turn it inside, flip it over, and then check where I should pin the loose edges together. and then I flip it back and then pin it and sew it up. And paste this, flip it, when I'm done, flip it over and paste the seams. Next I'm repeating our old technique. Pin the ribbon to one side, sew, fold over, pin the other side. In my experience, I've noticed that satin doesn't really like to be ironed that much when you have some small details. So the earlier you press the seam without it bothering any other seam, the better. I've had times when the whole outfit turned wonky because of pressing the seams at the wrong time. Anyway, I've sewn one side of the ribbon. Now I'm folding over and pinning the other side. Okay, now that that's done, let's check it on the doll. And because of the sleeves being so big and flowy, I put the sleeves of my chiffon inner layer into the sleeves of my satin outer layer first, then put it on the doll and tie a ribbon around the chiffon layer to keep it in place. And then I put my skirt on one side and flip over, lift up the satin outer layer and tie the skirt in the back. Now, the last part of the outfit itself, the belt piece. So my first belt piece, I have 2 pieces, and this one's going to go around the waist. It can be any shape you want. I have an odd shape, and I pin it around the sides and leaving an opening at the center, front, bottom to flip it inside out and to put the hanging pieces in. My first hanging piece is made of 2 black pieces of fabric, which I pin together on the sides and I'll flip it over. My second hanging piece is a diamond-ish, which is also 2 pieces, and I sew it and flip it inside out. And I misspoke actually. My first hanging piece is the brocade. And you haven't seen much of it, but I'm the type to struggle super hard when I have to turn things inside out. It's like I've seen people do it so much easier, and it's like, are we even doing the same thing? Well, anyway, I'm super terrible at turning things inside out, especially small things. You'd think that with the thinness of the brocade and the satin, it'd be easier. And I'm going to iron that flat and place the seam. And now turning the belt piece inside out. What's special about my brocade this time, that on one side of the fabric it's red with black dots, and then on the other side it's black with red dots. So with my belt, I decided I'm going to use that on the outside, it's one side's going to be black and red, the other side's going to be red and black. I was thinking to make it reversible, but that doesn't really work out that well. And I'm folding over the open seam, the edges of the open seam, and then I'm going to press the seams. It's going to be a lot easier to hand sew closed later. And I'm checking both my hanging pieces, check if they fit inside, and they do. So for my pointy hanging piece, I'm going to do the same old thing. Pin one side of the ribbon, sew, fold over, pin the other side, sew all around the edges. And after I'm going to do that, I'm going to put both my hanging pieces in the opening of the belt, and I'm going to use a ladder stitch to hand sew it closed. And what I didn't show is me using beads and rhinestones and stuff to decorate the belt. I'm struggling so much with the smaller details, while my ribbon is starting to fray everywhere. I'm constantly using fabric glue to seal the edges of my ribbon pieces. But sometimes it doesn't want to work out that well. But anyway. Also, I'm going to be closing the belt with a snap in the back. And I also sewed a black piece of ribbon where the snaps were, to make a bit more of an accent color, a bit more of an accent to the belt piece. Next, shoes. I'm starting with 4 pieces of cardboard, 2 for the insoles and 2 for the toe caps. My toe caps each have 2 cuts in them, so that I can bend them and shape them around my insole. And then I'm going to use tape to tape the toe cap and insole together. Now, I'm getting tired. also using a quick drying glue. Locally it's called Bostik, and I'm not sure what type of glue it is actually, but it's pretty quick drying and pretty strong, so pretty easy to use. So taping up the toe caps to the inner soles, and I'm going to use some of our brocade fabric for the fabric of the shoes, as well as some of white ribbon. So for each shoe I have 3 pieces, so 2 pieces for the back and 1 piece for the toe. My first step is to sew the 2 back pieces together, and then I'm going to use our technique again and sew the white ribbon along the top edge. Pin on one side, sew, then fold over, pin on the other side, and finish sewing. And then for 2 toe pieces of fabric, I also do the same. I pin the ribbon on one side, sew, fold over, pin on the other side, finish sewing. Okay, so after sewing that, I start with the back pieces of my shoes. Okay, well, still pinning and sewing. It's super tedious to do actually, but it gives a pretty nice effect. Okay, now we've done that, we're going to use the back parts and start gluing them onto the shoes. It's like I'm gluing the part of the excess seam allowance that's supposed to go under the shoe at the bottom of the heel, and then when that's dry, I slowly glue the edges of the shoe of the fabric around the sole. I didn't say it before, but each of the back pieces are just a rectangular piece, and the toe pieces are also rectangular pieces of fabric, but the toe pieces we're going to cut off the excess fabric later. The next step is to add the toe piece of the fabric. We add some glue on the top of the toe cap and put the fabric on, and add more glue and pull and stitch the fabric in different directions to make it smooth as we glue it on. And then we fold over the bottom edges of the excess fabric, and I'll cut off some of the excess fabric and glue the rest onto the bottom of the sole. And then our shoe sole, I used craft foam because it's flexible and readily available, and since I don't have the actual doll that this outfit is for on me, I can't be certain it's not going to be a struggle to put it on. So I use craft foam for the soles, but you can use anything you want: wood, clay, resin, whatever. And then my shoesies are done. Unfortunately, I didn't show. I made the jewelry long before I started the outfit, so I can't show you how I made that. And it's totally out of frame. But anyway, thanks for watching. Bye!